Rain poured from the heavens as if the sky itself was mourning. The streets were almost empty, glistening under the pale yellow glow of flickering streetlights. In the distance, the roar of an old motorcycle broke the silence, a heavy sound that echoed desperation. On that trembling bike, an old man leaned forward, gripping the handlebars with trembling hands, his eyes fixed ahead, his heart pounding with a pain that was heavier than the storm itself. In his arms, a small boy lay motionless, his head resting limply against the man's chest, blood mixing with the rain. Every second felt like eternity. Every drop of water that hit his wrinkled face burned like fire, because the fear of losing the boy was far greater than any pain he had ever known. If you believe that kindness, compassion, second chances still have the power to change lives, then pause this video for a moment, hit the like button, share this story, comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because today, what you're about to witness might just restore your faith in humanity. The man's name was Walter, a 68-year-old retired mechanic who had lived most of his life in silence and regret. He had no family left. His wife had passed years ago, and his only son had walked out after a bitter argument that left scars neither could heal. For years, Walter had spent his days fixing old engines in his garage, keeping himself company with the hum of machines and the echo of what-ifs. But 3 months ago, a neighbor's child named Ben had started visiting him every afternoon. Ben was 8, curious, lively, with a heart full of laughter that Walter hadn't heard in years. The boy would sit beside him, handing over tools, asking endless questions, and calling him Grandpa Walt. It was a simple friendship, but for Walter it had reignited something deep inside, a reason to smile again. That day, the rain had come earlier than expected. Ben had insisted on helping Walter fix an old dirt bike. Just one ride, the boy had begged. Walter hesitated, but seeing the excitement in his eyes, he agreed. They went out on a quiet street, just a short ride, slow and careful. But the rain-slick pavement betrayed them. The bike skidded. Ben fell. Walter could still hear the sound of that impact, the thud, the gasp, the stillness that followed. Panic overtook him as he saw Ben's tiny frame lying still, his head bleeding. Without thinking, he lifted the boy into his arms and rushed to his motorcycle, ignoring the pain in his own knees, ignoring everything but the boy's faint heartbeat against his chest. By the time he reached the hospital, his hands were shaking so hard he could barely keep the engine running. The emergency lights blurred through the rain. He stumbled through the automatic doors, shouting for help, soaked to the bone, his grey beard dripping, his voice breaking between sobs. Nurses turned their heads instantly, startled by the sight, a drenched old man clutching a lifeless boy as though the world depended on it. Among them was Nurse Emily, a young woman in her early 30s, calm but fierce in her compassion. She had seen countless emergencies before, but something about this scene froze her heart. Maybe it was the look in the old man's eyes, the desperate pleading kind of love that spoke louder than words. She ran forward, extending her arms. "Give him to me," she whispered, her voice steady yet filled with urgency. Walter hesitated, as if letting go meant losing everything he had left. Emily's gaze met his, firm, assuring, and he finally handed Ben over, whispering through tears, "Please, save him." Inside the emergency room, everything became a blur of movement, gloves snapping, monitors beeping, doctors shouting instructions. Walter stood outside the glass doors, watching helplessly as they worked on Ben. His hands trembled, his clothes were soaked, his heart beat with the rhythm of the machines inside. Minutes passed like hours. Every time a doctor leaned over the boy, Walter's breath stopped. He could only see shadows moving, wires connecting, hope fading and reigniting again. Emily was in the center of it all, calm yet fierce, pressing on the boy's chest, calling for oxygen, refusing to stop even when the others began to lose hope. And then the sound came, a faint, fragile beep. The monitor blinked, the boy's chest rose slightly. Emily froze for a moment, then smiled through tears. "We've got him," she whispered. Walter fell to his knees outside, tears mixing with the rain still dripping from his coat. He didn't even realize he was crying until his chest started to hurt from the relief. He pressed his hands to the glass, whispering a prayer he didn't know he still remembered. When Emily came out, her scrubs stained and her face exhausted, Walter tried to speak but couldn't. She knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "He's alive," she said softly. "He's going to be okay." Those words broke something open inside him. He sobbed like a child, clutching his chest, whispering thank you again and again. Emily didn't say anything more. She just stayed there for a moment, letting him cry, knowing that sometimes silence can heal more than words ever could. Over the next few days, Walter never left the hospital. He sat beside Ben's bed, holding his hand, talking to him about bikes, stars, and promises of fixing engines together again. Nurses brought him coffee, blankets, and quiet smiles. Emily checked on him every few hours, making sure both her patients, the boy and the man, were okay. She learned that Walter had no one else, that his heart had been lonely for years, and that this boy had become the only light in his life. What she didn't know was that she too had started becoming a part of that light. One evening, Emily found Walter sitting alone by the window, staring at the rain again. She walked up quietly and said, "You know, sometimes the people who come into our lives for a short while end up saving us in ways we never expected." Walter turned to her, eyes red but soft, and replied, "You didn't just save him, you saved me too." She smiled, tears in her own eyes now, because she knew that was true. Compassion flows both ways. When Ben finally woke up, the first word he said was "Grandpa." Walter laughed through tears, clutching his hand. Emily stood by the doorway, watching them with a quiet smile. It was one of those rare moments that felt like the world had stopped to breathe, a moment that reminded everyone in that room what humanity was really about. Days turned into weeks, and Ben recovered faster than anyone expected. Doctors called it a miracle, but Walter knew it was something more. It was love, persistence, and the courage of a nurse who refused to give up. Before leaving, Walter went to find Emily. She was by the nurse's station, busy as always. But when she saw him, she smiled warmly. He held out a small metal pendant, a piece from the old dirt bike they'd crashed on. "For you," he said quietly, a reminder that even broken things can be fixed if someone cares enough. Emily took it, her eyes glistening. "And sometimes," she said softly, "broken hearts too." That night, as Walter and Ben walked out of the hospital under a clear sky, the rain had stopped. The air smelled fresh, like the world had just been washed clean. Walter looked up, the stars reflecting in his tired eyes, and whispered to himself, "Thank you." He didn't know if he was talking to God, to Emily, or to life itself, maybe all of them. Weeks later, Walter returned to his garage. The bike that had once brought him guilt now stood fixed and shining again, this time with a small charm hanging from the handlebar, the hospital tag from Ben's wrist, now a symbol of hope. Ben visited him every day after school, his laughter filling the place like sunlight, and sometimes Emily stopped by too, bringing sandwiches and smiles, sitting with them as they worked on engines together. The three of them had become something like a family, not bound by blood, but by the kind of love that's born in the hardest moments. In a world often too busy to care, one act of courage, one act of compassion had changed 3 lives forever. The old man who had lost everything found purpose again. The nurse who fought to save a life rediscovered why she had chosen her calling. And a boy who once lay between life and death now lived with 2 people who would never let him fall again. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment, like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. And before you go, I have one simple request. Comment below. What would you have done if you were in Nurse Emily's place that night? Sometimes all it takes is one selfless act to bring light back into someone's life. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes humanity so beautiful.